If someone missed the first part of the video, then a hint has been made for you in the upper right corner. In the second season, the battle of good against evil continues, where Jack the Ripper, as a representative of the people, will fight against Hercules, the representative of the gods. But before that, we were shown a fragment where, before all this, Brynhilde and Little Gear met Hercules, who was going to the arena. It turns out that the Valkyries communicate very well with Hercules because he became a god in order to protect people. And they were shocked that it was Hercules who would come out next against the people, in connection with which Brynhilde wished him good luck. Also on the way, Loki approached Hercules for a conversation. It became clear from him that Hercules wants to win in his battle in order to take advantage of this moment and ask the gods to have mercy on people. After that, we were again returned to the Valkyries, where the first one told her sister that the one who she hates with all her heart will act for the side of the people in this battle, because he is a real scum of society. She talked about the maniac and sadist Jack the Ripper. We were transferred to the arena where Heimdall introduced the participants. And it turned out that almost all the audience, even people, rooted for Hercules, since Jack was a killer. And right before the fight, we were shown the story of his childhood, where he grew up in the most terrible conditions. And everything that the gods awarded him was an eye that could see the emotions of people. He also had a mother, Mary, who entertained people for money. However, for all his modest life, Jack was happy, because he was surrounded by motherly love. In addition, he loved to read, but later it turned out that this was just the surface of the iceberg, because his mother had 5 abortions before Jack appeared. But she left Jack herself, because she loved one guy named Jack Smith, who promised to return to her, but having become popular, left her. The mother, realizing the betrayal, began to tell Jack that she had given birth to him in vain, because if that guy Smith did not come to her anymore, then she no longer needed her son. And she casually hit him on the temple with a book. And then our Jack realized that his mother did not love him at all, but the guy who left her. And the color of his mother's love and emotions, which he always loved, had nothing to do with him. And Jack decided to rid her of this color. And he saw the color of fear, which he considered insanely beautiful. The mother, in response, wanted to pounce on the guy, but he destroyed her with one movement of his hand. And then he took a book of Shakespeare, came to his alleged father, that same Jack Smith, and after reading him a few lines from Shakespeare, he destroyed it. Well, then the guy got lost on the streets of London and became the most elusive, cruelest maniac in the history of mankind. After all, even Sherlock Holmes, about whom Arthur Conan Doyle wrote, was invented due to the fact that the writer devoted his whole life to the capture of Jack the Ripper. After that, we were returned to the battlefield, where Heimdall announced the start of the duel. Hercules immediately offered the maniac to surrender, because in this case he promises that he will save his soul from complete destruction. However, Jack refused the offer and only thanked Hercules for agreeing to fight on his territory. After that, he took out a giant scissors and called them his Wayland, with which he would fight. Hercules, in response, said that in this case he would fight against him with full strength. However, immediately after these words, Jack suddenly ran away and disappeared into an alley. Hercules ran after him, and it turned out that Jack was in a hurry so as not to miss the tea time, where he also offered tea to Hercules. But God decided to end this fight with one blow. However, it turned out that Jack had prepared a trap for him, which was made from ordinary human weapons that cannot injure Hercules' body. It turned out that Jack was just checking the legends about the power of this god. After that, Hercules again reduced the distance and already wanted to destroy Jack, but he fired a weapon at the roof and began to run away. Hercules caught up with him in a jump and broke his giant scissors. But it turned out that Jack was lying, because his Veland was not scissors, but a bag with an infinite number of knives, with which he further mutilated the body of Hercules, because they were turned into divine weapons. However, Hercules has an unshakable spirit. He only pulled out the knives and continued to walk towards Jack, repelling his knife attacks. In this connection, he reduced the distance for the strike, but Jack parried his attack with an umbrella. Next, Hercules decided to use the power of the exodus of his 12 labors, where he immediately began to cover himself with tattoos. And he also used the power of the first feat, the power of the Nemean lion. Using some kind of lion's chidori, he threw Jack into the building. Everyone thought that Jack had lost, but Brynhilde said that this was only the beginning of their battle, Then Jack got to his feet and said that he liked it and set his own shoulder. And right after, he reads quotes from Shakespeare and announced the beginning of the second act of their battle, and therefore he took out a giant penknife. But before that, we were shown the story of Ares about the tattoos of Hercules, where it turned out that the price of this power and tattoos is the life of Hercules himself, because if he does not have time to destroy Jack before the moment his body is completely covered with a tattoo, the body and soul of Hercules himself will be destroyed. Therefore, this technique is also called the Exodus of Hercules. But Ares believes that Hercules will win, because his real power is not in gigantic strength, but in invincible will. In this regard, we were shown his story from ancient Thebes, where then Hercules was an ordinary boy, helping others in any way he could. His name then was Alcid. He always helped those who were on the side of the righteous. And since Alcides then had a weak body and was periodically bullied by those who are stronger and dumber, Alcides began to train his body hard. To do this, he always chose the most difficult path until there was not a single one left who would be stronger and could mock him. There was also a statue of Zeus in their city, where, according to legend, ambrosia is located, the red liquid of Zeus himself, which can give a true hero great strength, but can destroy a false hero. But Hercules, as a real hero, decided to pump his strength with real actions and exploits. We were shown how at the same time the next council of Valhalla was held, where 74% of the gods were for the destruction of people because of their greed and disrespect of some people from the city of Thebes. And since this was Ares' territory, he said he would deal with these people himself. It is clear that then most of the people were righteous and just prayed to the gods, and were not to blame for anything. Therefore, when Ares with the strongest army of the gods approached the walls of the city, Alcid stood in their way, who was against them destroying people, because they in turn worship the gods, but the gods selfishly erase entire cities because of the misdeeds of some people. Alcides tried to stop Ares, but he stopped the guy with his heel. Ares, on the other hand, just liked the determination of Alcides, and he offered him to bend the knee, and then he would spare him. But he again repeated that the gods unfairly judge people. In this regard, he is ready to give his life to protect innocent righteous people. On the basis of which he took out the very red liquid of Zeus from his pocket, and he drank it completely. Ares, knowing her properties, thought that the guy was no longer a tenant. However, Alcides' hair turned white, and he began to turn into the ancient mob Psycho 100, and he received a power equal to Ares, since Alcides was a real hero in his soul. He single-handedly began the battle with Ares and his strongest army, which he defeated as a result, and they were left with Ares to fight one-on-one. Then Zeus himself appeared, who stopped this fight. He also said that he would make Alcides a god, so that he could protect people from heaven and not create problems on earth. In return, only Alcid asked the gods to promise that they would not touch people. And Zeus gave the go-ahead for this, but said that Alcid should make sure that people no longer deviate from the righteous path. Then there was the coronation of Alcides, and he became a god, the son of Zeus himself. He was given a new name in honor of the wife of Zeus, Hera, and he became known to everyone as Hercules. Well, Ares is now proud that after the fight with him, Hercules became a god and his best friend. After that, we were returned to the battlefield, where Jack continued to throw various types of knives from Hercules from the bag. He also pulled strings around the entire perimeter, with which he pulled knives and fired at the god from all sides. Knives fought from all sides, and Hercules began to turn into a hedgehog. In response to this, he decided to use the power of the 6 feet, the Stymphalian birds, and he redirected the knives back to Jack with the wind, and he was able to fight off most of the knives, but received several wounds. And Hercules finally noticed his unreasonably strong eye, which contained an emotional Uzumaki Sharingan. Then Jack said that now, for the first time in his life, he would destroy a real god. Also, Jack once again reminded that he considers the color of the emotion of fear the most beautiful, and he wants to see the fear of Hercules. But he replied that there was no fear in him, and the only thing that could unbalance him was the reign of injustice. After that, Hercules attacked again, and Jack began to run away from him, climbing onto Big Ben, which Hercules then cut down, and Jack hung on the arrows. Hercules used his 7th labor, where he defeated the Cretan bull. Jack, in response, threw a watch dial at him, with which, to everyone's surprise, he was able to injure the hand of the uncomprehending Hercules. It turned out that Jack had been lying about his Wayland all this time, since his real Wayland is gloves, with which, when he touches something, he turns it into a divine weapon. In this connection, we were shown the moment when Brynhilde in gear came to Fleck, the 11th of the Valkyries, who was sharply opposed to being a maniac Wayland. However, in the end, Jack himself appeared there and grabbing her by the throat, forcibly connected their souls, and Fleck turned into gloves. Brynhilde was sure that it was her strength that would help win this battle. Well, in the meantime, Jack on the battlefield, after the story about his Wayland, said that now the whole of London will be his divine weapon. It was also explained to us that due to the lack of love, Jack became what he is now. Hearing all this, Hercules rewound his hand and said that Jack had already lost. And God began to list all the things that made Jack so disappointed. And although Hercules considers people weak due to the fact that they are most often ruled by emotions, despite all this, he loves people, and he promised to save Jack from his emotional dependence. In this regard, he called on Cerberus from his 12th labor, which bit him on the hands and body, and Hercules changed completely. Well, Zeus explained to us that now everything will depend on the time of the battle, because in this form Hercules is unimaginably strong. However, over time, if he does not have time to defeat Jack, then Cerberus will completely absorb Hercules. In this connection, the god began to attack, but Jack dodged and began to recline everyone in a row in response. But the god broke all his items and used the blow of the great hero. But Jack dodged again and tried to climb the building. But Hercules jumped towards him, and with a blow stuck him into the ground, where Jack was impaled on the fence. Hercules said that Jack could not hide anywhere in this city, but Jack corrected him and reminded him that everything around him was his weapon. It turns out that when he was falling, he cut the Big Ben building and turned it into a weapon, and it began to fall right on Hercules. Jack, to distract him, attacked him and, pushing off him, flew through the building. And as a result, it fell entirely on Hercules and crushed him. However, it turned out that he was able to survive this collapse. The audience was glad that he was alive. And Jack, seeing this, began to turn into the Joker because he even more wanted to recolor the color of Hercules' emotions. He decided to arrange a grand finale, and therefore he made a sword and shield out of the wreckage. And they continued to fight in close combat, where Hercules, although he was with one arm, he easily threw Jack into the building, after he decided to finish him off. But Jack dodged. And it turns out that all this time he wanted to punch Hercules in the head, but he did not manage to do it. Then Jack stood up and, heading towards Hercules, began to sing songs and recite quotations. After they hit each other at the same time, where Jack was the first, and he punched Hercules with his own hands. It turned out that he soaked them with his red liquid, turning it into a divine weapon. In this connection, Hercules realized that he lost and reminded Jack that he does not feel fear now, because the color of his soul has not changed, and all this is because of love for people. Then he suddenly hugged Jack, but he smiled in response and called him stubborn. Hercules also told Brynhilde that now everything is in her hands, after which Hercules disappeared, and already further Fleck, leaving Wayland, asked Jack how he feels after the destruction of the god. He replied that it was not clear, because before that he had not yet felt this feeling. After that, Fleck flew away and asked Jack to go to the infirmary as soon as possible. Our Wind picked up his hat and began to leave the arena, and he also thought along the way that if he could use his one wish, he would wish to meet his love. However, already at the exit from the arena, they began to throw stones at him for destroying the universal favorite, Hercules. And only Shakespeare, who was watching this, revealed the secret of Jack's behavior. He said that one should not look away from the fact that the truth, where the beautiful can turn into an abomination, and beauty can be hidden in an abomination. And this is the essence of man. Next, we were transferred to the Valkyries, where Gyr began to make claims to Brynhilde for the fact that Jack destroyed their beloved Hercules. But the first one only said that Valkyrie stands for chooser of the slain. Then, out of anger, she hurt her hand on the door in the altar room. There, in honor of the memory of Hercules, she set up an altar for him next to the dead Adam and Lubu. And she began to shed tears, promising that after the end of Ragnarok, she promised to join them. And at the same time, Ares and other gods were furious because of the departure from the life of Hercules and his loss. Well, Loki, like Detective Sherlock Holmes, put everything on the shelves how brilliantly Jack deceived Hercules in battle. And Zeus angrily destroyed the place where they watched the fights. And now they are all waiting for further actions of people. After that, we were shown the waiting room for the champions of mankind, the corridor of the arena, where Soji Okita and Izami Kondo were talking, who were waiting for their fights with the gods. And right after, we were shown Loki, who came to talk to the Buddha to ask him if he helped the Valkyries learn to connect souls and use Wayland with the help of the Buddha's controlled thing from his spiritual realm. In other words, is it not he who gave the Valkyries the opportunity, risking their lives, to share fate with people and fight against the gods? The Buddha replied that the question was too long, and he listened to almost everything deftly. Then Loki already directly asked if the Buddha was a traitor among the gods. But he boldly replied that even if so, then what? And Loki explained that in this case, Loki would become a corpse. After that, the 7 heavenly arbiters of justice appeared. They are also the 7 gods of happiness. 7 decided to show the Buddha for betrayal. Loki also joined them, and they decided to beat the Buddha with 8. In response to this, the Buddha bit through his lollipop and pierced Ebisu's hand with a stick from it. And then Sasaki Kojiro appeared, who was unhappy that such an unequal duel was taking place here, and he decided to help the Buddha. After that, Tsuji Okita and Izami Kondo joined with Zabuza's sword. They also decided to join this fight, because they cannot miss such fun. Ebisu decided to attack first, but he couldn't even hit the Buddha. Then Loki joined in and summoned his weapon, and Tsuji Okita started the fight with him. But everyone was stopped by the appearance of Odin and Zeus, where further the crows of Odin began to speak and accuse all the participants. However, people and gods considered them too cute to obey them. And then Odin turned on, who with one word, and his aura cooled the ardor of everyone. In this connection, Loki immediately changed his mind and went to watch the next fight, and the swordsman did the same. Well, Zeus asked the Buddha not to create more unnecessary problems, but he only began to laugh in response, because the only one who can order him is himself. Then Zeus, without further ado, went to watch the next battle. Well, Odin further for some reason sucked life out of plants with his power. Geir, meanwhile, apologized to Brynhilde for going too far after Heracles passed away, and they went to the chambers of the next representative of the people. It was Raiden Temimin, the strongest Yokozuna sumo wrestler in human history. However, for Geir, he was the personification of all the 7 sins of mankind, on the basis of which Brynhilde woke him up with a cry. In this connection, he flew up and was already about to retire with one of them, but Brynhilde stopped him with a blow and offered him her sister, the 3rd Valkyrie Trud, who herself was larger than Temimin in size, for personal pleasures. But it turned out that our great sumo wrestler is crazy about big girls, from which even the harsh labor turned into a sweet girl. And as a result, she fell in love with him, and they were united by souls. After that, we were immediately transferred to the arena, which was redesigned in the style of the Japanese sumo arena. Heimdall began to introduce the participants of the fight, where the strongest sumo wrestler of all time, Raiden Temimin, who we already know will act for people, and for the gods will be the familiar Indian supreme god, Shiva. This fight will be watched by all the strongest sumo wrestlers, and from Shiva's side, his 3 wives and half-elephant son Ganesha, who believes that his father will win, will be observers. Meanwhile, at the arena, Shiva said that he would destroy Temimin, but the sumo wrestler, in response, immediately took a handful of salt and, after conducting a ritual sumo ceremony, attacked Shiva with a powerful technique. In addition, he delivered several more blows to Shiva's head, and he was about to finish him off with a knee to the head, but Shiva easily stopped his blow and hit back with a good blow to the chest. After that, Temimin stood up and said that now he will show his true strength. But before that, for clarification, we were shown January 1767. At the time, Temimin was 3 years old, and by this time he was still unable to walk, and his parents prayed that the gods would help him get back on his feet. And in the end, Temimin got to his feet. However, it turned out that his muscles were so strong that they broke his bones in his arms, legs, and ribs. And now, in order to change his fate, he began to train other muscles in order to restrain his own muscles with them. In short, a cycle of muscles began in his body, which was called 100 seals. And it turns out that Wayland labor is a supramuscular sumo-skeletal belt that helps to restrain Tami Monu's muscles. And it turns out that he became the strongest sumo wrestler despite the fact that he held himself back all his life. In this regard, he began to release his muscles in the arena and asked Trud to restrain them, Roughly speaking, he has taken off his chains and will now fight at full strength. He started attacking Shiva and was even able to put him on the ground. In response to this, Shiva collided with his head, and it turns out that their heads are of the same strength. Then Shiva began to fight off his attacks on an equal footing. However, Temimin caught one of Shiva's hands and damaged it with his power. Now the god could not keep his balance normally. However, Temimin noticed that Shiva's blows only got stronger. After that, they continued to fight on equal terms and enjoyed this fight. And Shiva even remembered the feeling of battle, which he felt for the last time 1,000 years ago. And they began to show us a story about the Indian pantheon, where there were 116 gods who were forever fighting among themselves for power, since in those days there was still no god who was so strong as to rule them all. Also in the same place, somewhere in the dense forests, two gods unknown at that time lived. A mischievous slob, disco dancer Shiva is the god of destruction, and his close friend, always training Rudra, the god of the storm. There their village was attacked by brother gods, bloodthirsty Asuras, which as a result, our friends destroyed without any problems. During their conversation, Rudra shared his dream that he wants to defeat everyone and climb to the top of India. Shiva, at first, began to laugh at him. However, in the end, he decided to support his friend, and they went to conquer the Indian pantheon. There, day after day, they began to defeat the Indian gods, moving up the pantheon, where they destroyed the strongest gods and took away their names. They eventually made it to the top. However, there Rudra offered Shiva to find out who was the strongest, because it was very important for him. And Shiva filled his eyes with water for the sake of his friend, and they began the most fierce battle in the history of India, where it turned out that Shiva was stronger. However, he tried to succumb to his friend so that his dream would come true. But he read it and gave up himself, because in his opinion, giving in is much worse than losing. In this connection, he gave his body tattoos with the names of the gods to Shiva, and he became the supreme god of India. But Rudra himself left the pantheon, and Shiva never saw his friend again. Then we were returned to the arena, where the same Rudra, along with other strongest Indian gods, was watching the fight between Shiva and Temimin. Here Shiva, without noticing him, decided to use his famous Shiva fighting dance. He began to move at an unrealistic speed, because of which Temimin could not even hit him. And Shiva continued to gain momentum, but Temimin was not even going to give up. In this connection, Shiva warmed up his body, and during the attack of Temimin, melted part of his face with his blow. And everyone thought that the Sumoist would soon lose, but he only smiled in response, because now he will show Shiva his real true power. But before that, we were shown the past, where little Temimin was called on the street to a yard sumo fight. And he defeated the strongest guy in this village in a second, and everyone started calling Temimin a monster and afraid of him. In this regard, he asked his mother why he was born not like all other children, and she replied that when he was born and could not move, she prayed to the gods every day that he could walk, and the gods seemed to have heard. And that's why Temimin has grown so big and strong, and she is insanely proud of him. Well, he needs to use his own strength to help people, using his skills for the benefit of those who are not as strong as him. And now, following the advice of his mother, Temimin grew up a nice and kind guy. And so he would have been able to live his whole life if at his 17 years old there had not been a powerful volcanic eruption, due to the ashes of which the crop was destroyed. And famine began in his hometown, and that moment changed his future. In this regard, he decided to leave his home in order to earn a lot of money, and he went on a long journey to get to the Sumo Academy. There, having gone to the first training session, he thought that with his strength he could harm one of the students, but it turned out that strength alone is not enough in sumo. The one whose martial art is more developed wins there, and strength is already a powerful bonus to this. In this connection, having trained well, he threw his opponent out of the arena in the first official fight. After that, over and over again, with just one blow, he defeated his opponents, and therefore became a real sumo legend. He also made a lot of money by sending it to his hometown to end the famine, and the trace of his glory began to warm all of Japan. But this holiday did not last long, because one day, seeing fear in the eyes of his opponent, he remembered the words of his mother and deliberately lost the fight to him. Then he remembered that feeling when the weak are afraid of him in the same way as it was in childhood, And since then, in order not to cripple his rivals and not harm those who are weaker, Tiniman stopped using his best techniques. And so there were 4 forbidden receptions. However, despite all this, he continued to defeat his opponents and send winnings to his hometown. And even holding back his strength, he had 96% of victories, where he himself voluntarily gave 4% of the defeat. And as a result, he ended his career without having fought with anyone at full strength. Based on what in the present, he decided to throw off all the existing shackles and use one of the techniques forbidden to himself. He began to perform the introductory ritual of Raiden and decided to use a death blow with the palm of his hand, where, having gathered all his strength, he was able to exceed the speed of sound with this blow and pierce Shiva, injuring 2 of his hands. But Shiva then rose to his feet again. It also turned out that after this blow, due to the recoil, Tiniman's muscles began to massively explode. In this connection, he asked Trud to help him so that he finished off Shiva with the last final blow. But Trud, out of love for him, tried to dissuade him, because after all this, his organs would be destroyed. But Tiniman said that he was ready to give his life for the sake of victory, because he is a real sumo fighter. And Trud, calling him a fool, agreed to help him, because once she told Gear that for the sake of her beloved man, she was even ready to give her life. Because of this, Tiniman turned on his strength to 100%. While Shiva, seeing his old friend Rudra, also decided to use all his strength, as he realized that now 1116 Indian gods believe in him, and he decided to go beyond his limits. He literally touched his heart and began to disperse it. According to legend, this technique is called Doomsday. In this connection, Shiva began to be covered with fire. He is going to dance a powerful dance until they burn to the ground, and Shiva creates a new world from the ashes. They attacked each other with their strongest attacks, and their bodies literally started to burn. Well, Brynhilde explained to us that the longer this fight goes on, the less muscle Tiniman will have. With Shiva, the situation is approximately the same, because he gradually begins to burn himself, and now it's counting down to the minutes. After that, they decided to put all their strength into the last blow. Tiniman attacked, but Shiva injured his hand with his blow. But he remained on his feet. However, he realized that he had already lost, and he asked Trud to turn back and not go out of life with him. But she refused to leave the guy she fell in love with. Well, Shiva, with the next blow, injured Tiniman's head, and he also thanked his opponent for the fact that they were able to carry out this greatest fight in history. And in the end, Shiva won. Well, the sumo wrestlers decided to carry out their greatest legend of Tiniman with a sumo stomp, and the bodies of Tiniman and Trud disintegrated. Then Shiva, leaving the arena, met his old friend and the rest of the gods. Zeus also appeared there, and Shiva, unexpectedly for everyone, said that it turns out that people are amazing. Zeus also agreed with him, because people are not so easy to defeat. Then we were shown Brynhilde and Gear, who remembered their conversation with Trud, and she realized that she left life happy. But Brynhilde was in the maximum fury because of the loss and the death of her sister. And she also made an altar for the deceased Tiniman next to other dead fighters. Next, we were shown the meeting of Zeus and Buddha, who was enjoying the sun under a tree. And there Zeus wanted to treat himself to what the Buddha eats, but he did not give him the bars and ate them all at once. It turned out that Zeus came to him to ask the Buddha to enter the arena in the 6th duel. Well, the Buddha immediately clarified whether Zeus really wants to destroy people, and he replied that yes, because he does not like to lose. The Buddha said that he does not condemn this, and he likes Zeus' excitement, and he agreed to enter the arena. And in parallel with this, we were shown Gear, who came to the infirmary to look for bandages for Brynhilde. And there she accidentally overheard the conversation of the 7 gods of happiness, who were bandaging themselves after being humiliated by the Buddha. And Gear was noticed there when she was eavesdropping. In this connection, the 7 began to ask why she was here, but she was saved by the appearance of Jack the Ripper. Meanwhile, the Buddha entered the arena for the 6th duel. Heimdall presented him as a representative of the gods, but the Buddha took the mouthpiece from him and, unexpectedly for everyone, said that he would fight not for the gods, but for humanity. Then everyone was shocked. He also added that if the gods do not want to save humanity, then he will save them himself. If you want to continue, then write about it in the comments. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, like and press the bell so as not to miss new videos. AniMap was with you. Bye everyone.